Have you ever noticed that the strongest man in the room is often the quietest? He doesn't argue to prove his point. He doesn't chase attention. He doesn't feel the need to explain himself to everyone. And somehow, people still listen when he finally speaks. Why? Because true strength has never been measured by the volume of your voice. It is measured by the peace you refuse to sacrifice. Most people mistake silence for weakness. They assume that if you don't defend yourself, you've already lost. But life teaches a very different lesson. Some battles aren't worth winning. Some arguments cost more than they're worth. And some people will never understand you, no matter how perfectly you explain yourself. The strongest men discover this earlier than most. They stop wasting energy on convincing those committed to misunderstanding them. Hello everyone. Welcome to the Magnetic Masculinity channel. In this video, you'll discover why powerful men often choose silence over noise, why emotional control speaks louder than endless explanations, and how mastering silence can become one of the greatest sources of confidence, respect, and inner freedom you'll ever develop. Now let's get started. Part 1. Silence is not weakness. It is emotional discipline. One of the biggest misunderstandings in life is believing that the loudest person is the strongest. Look closely, and you'll often discover the opposite. The people who constantly raise their voices usually aren't protecting the truth. They're protecting their emotions. They need to be right. They need to be heard. They need the world to validate what they're feeling. A strong man doesn't carry that burden. Not because he has nothing to say, but because he understands something that experience teaches better than words ever could. Not every opinion deserves a response. Not every insult deserves your attention. And not every misunderstanding deserves an explanation. When you are young, silence feels uncomfortable. You want everyone to know your intentions. You rush to defend your reputation. You replay conversations in your mind, searching for the perfect sentence that would finally make people understand. But years have a way of changing that. You begin to realize that some people have already decided who you are before you ever speak. No explanation will change a mind that has no desire to understand. The more you chase their approval, the more exhausted you become. This is why emotionally mature men become selective with their words. They no longer speak to win every argument. They speak when their words have purpose. They understand that words are like arrows. Once released, they cannot be taken back. Silence, however, creates space to observe, space to think, space to prevent emotions from making decisions that wisdom would later regret. Many people believe self-control is about suppressing anger. It isn't. Self-control is choosing your response instead of surrendering to your reaction. There is an enormous difference. Anyone can react. Very few people can pause. And in that pause, character is revealed. Imagine someone insults you in public. Your first instinct might be to fight back immediately, to defend your pride, to prove you are not weak. But a man who has mastered himself asks a different question. Will responding improve my life, or only satisfy my ego for a few seconds? That single question separates wisdom from impulse. Because not every battle deserves your energy. Sometimes the greatest victory is leaving your peace untouched. Silence is not surrender. It is the confidence of a man who knows his value, doesn't rise or fall with someone else's opinion. He doesn't need the final word. He doesn't need everyone to agree with him. He simply protects something far more valuable than his pride, his inner peace. And in a world where everyone is competing to be heard, the man who knows when to remain silent often becomes the one people remember the most. Part 2. Powerful men listen more than they speak. One of the quietest advantages a strong man possesses is this. He learns far more than he reveals. While most people are busy waiting for their turn to speak, he is paying attention. He notices the hesitation in someone's voice, the inconsistency between words and actions, the emotions hidden behind a smile. Because when you stop talking, you begin seeing. Silence sharpens perception, and perception is a form of power. Think about the wisest people you've ever met. They rarely dominated every conversation. They asked thoughtful questions. They observed carefully. And when they finally spoke, their words carried weight because they had first taken the time to understand. This is something many men only learn after making painful mistakes. When we're younger, we often believe that confidence means having an answer for everything. We interrupt. We explain. We defend ourselves before anyone even asks. We feel uncomfortable with pauses, so we fill every silence with unnecessary words. But maturity changes that. You begin to realize that every sentence reveals something about you. Your fears, your desires, your insecurities, your ambitions. The more desperately you try to impress people, the more information you hand them. The man who speaks without thinking often loses influence before he realizes it. The man who listens first quietly gains it. This doesn't mean becoming mysterious for the sake of appearing powerful. It means becoming intentional. Not every thought deserves to be spoken. Not every plan needs to be announced. Not every success requires applause. Some of the most meaningful progress happens in complete silence, while others are talking about the life they hope to build. The disciplined man is already building it. He understands that actions create credibility. Words merely introduce the possibility. There is another reason powerful men value silence. Silence reveals character. Give people enough space and they often tell you everything you need to know. The impatient reveal their frustration. The dishonest contradict themselves. The arrogant seek attention. The wise become curious. A man who constantly interrupts never hears these things. But a man who is comfortable with silence gathers insights that others completely miss. Over time, this habit transforms every area of his life. He becomes a better leader because he understands before he directs. A better friend because he listens before he advises. A better partner because he seeks to understand before asking to be understood. And perhaps most importantly, he becomes a better man because silence teaches him to observe not only others, but himself, his own emotions, his own impulses, his own weaknesses. That is where real strength begins, because mastering other people may earn temporary influence, but mastering yourself creates a lifetime of quiet, unshakable power. And that kind of power never needs to announce its presence. It is felt long before a single word is spoken. Before we continue, I want to ask you something that deserves an honest answer. How many times has speaking from anger created a better outcome in your life? And if you're on a journey to build emotional discipline, inner confidence, stoic wisdom, and the quiet strength that truly commands respect, make sure to subscribe to the channel. Every week, we explore timeless lessons that help you think more clearly, respond more wisely, and become the kind of man whose presence speaks louder than his words. Now, let's continue because the next lesson may completely change the way you understand silence and the extraordinary power hidden within it. Part 3. Silence protects your power. One of the greatest lessons life will ever teach you is this: not everyone deserves access to your thoughts. When we're young, we often believe honesty means telling people everything. We share every dream, every plan, every frustration, every victory. We believe that if people know our hearts, they will understand us better. But experience has a quiet way of correcting that belief. The more people know, the more opinions they offer. Some encourage you, some quietly envy you, some doubt you before you've even begun, and some will use your own words against you when life becomes difficult. That is why powerful men become careful, not fearful, with what they reveal. They don't hide because they are insecure. They protect what is valuable. Think of a seed buried beneath the ground. For weeks, nothing appears to happen. No applause, no recognition, no visible progress. Yet beneath the surface, roots are growing. Strength is forming. The tree does not announce itself while it is becoming. It simply grows. A strong man lives the same way. He doesn't tell everyone about the business he wants to build. He doesn't constantly announce every goal on social media. He doesn't need strangers to applaud a life that is still under construction. He understands something that many people learn too late. Energy spent talking about your future is often energy stolen from building it. This doesn't mean you become secretive or distrustful. It means you become intentional. You learn the difference between sharing for connection and sharing for validation. Those are not the same. The need to constantly explain yourself usually comes from an invisible fear. The fear of not being seen, the fear of being misunderstood, the fear that your worth depends on someone else's agreement. But a man who knows who he is no longer carries that burden. He doesn't feel compelled to justify every decision. If he changes careers, he works quietly. If he starts a business, he builds quietly. If he ends a relationship, he heals quietly. Not because silence makes him mysterious, but because growth rarely happens in the noise. It happens in the unseen hours, in early mornings, in lonely evenings, in moments when no one is watching. That is where character is forged. There is another reason silence is so powerful. Part 4. Silence is the language of emotional mastery. There comes a point in every man's life when he realizes something that completely changes the way he responds to the world. You don't have to attend every argument you're invited to. At first, this feels impossible. Someone criticizes you. You want to defend yourself. Someone misunderstands you. You want to explain every detail. Someone insults your character. You want to prove them wrong. It's a natural instinct. The ego believes every accusation is a battle that must be won. But wisdom asks a different question. What will this conversation look like 1 year from now? Most of the time, while the answer is simple, it won't matter. The argument that steals your peace today will become a forgotten memory. The opinion that keeps you awake tonight will eventually disappear into the noise of life. So why surrender your energy to something so temporary? Emotionally strong men understand that every reaction has a cost. Every unnecessary argument drains attention. Every emotional outburst steals focus from the life they're trying to build. And focus is one of the most valuable resources a man possesses. That's why they guard it carefully. Notice how mountains never argue with the wind. The ocean doesn't become smaller because someone throws a stone into it. The sun never rises earlier just because people doubt it will. Nature teaches a lesson that many people overlook. True strength doesn't rush to defend itself. It simply continues being what it is. The same is true for a grounded man. He doesn't spend his life chasing every rumor. He doesn't waste hours responding to every criticism. He doesn't feel threatened by people who misunderstand him, because he knows something they don't. Time has a way of exposing reality. Character is difficult to fake for long. Eventually, actions speak louder than explanations ever could. This doesn't mean silence is always the answer. There are moments when you must speak. When someone you love needs your honesty. When injustice demands courage. When your values require a voice. Silence is not about avoiding difficult conversations. It is about choosing meaningful ones. That is a difference many people never learn. The disciplined man asks himself 3 simple questions before he speaks. Is it true? Is it necessary? Will it improve the situation? If the answer is no, he lets the moment pass. Not because he lacks confidence, but because he values peace more than pride. Ironically, this restraint often earns him more respect than any perfectly crafted argument ever could. Part 5. The quietest man often carries the greatest strength. If you've listened this far, you may have realized that silence has very little to do with words. It has everything to do with mastery. Mastery over your emotions, mastery over your impulses, mastery over the endless need to prove your worth to people who have already made up their minds. That is why the strongest men often become quieter as they grow older. Not because life has made them cold, but because life has taught them what truly deserves their energy. When they were younger, they argued to be understood. Now they build a life that speaks for itself. When they were younger, they tried to impress everyone. Now they focus on becoming someone they can respect. When they were younger, every criticism felt personal. Now they understand that another person's opinion often reveals more about the speaker than the one being judged. That shift changes everything. Imagine carrying a glass of water all day. At first, it feels light. An hour later, your arm begins to ache. It arrives when you stop expecting other people to give you permission to be calm. It arrives when you accept that not everyone will understand your journey. Some people will underestimate you, some will criticize your choices, some will mistake your silence for weakness. Let them. A lion does not lose sleep because sheep fail to recognize its strength. The mountain does not become smaller because someone refuses to climb it. Likewise, your character is not reduced because another person cannot see its value. One day you'll notice something remarkable. The less you feel the need to respond, the more freedom you experience. Your mornings become lighter. Your conversations become more intentional. Your decisions become clearer. Your relationships become healthier because they are no longer fueled by emotional reactions, but by thoughtful choices. And perhaps the greatest reward of all, you begin hearing your own inner voice again. Not the voice of fear, not the voice of comparison, not the voice that constantly wonders what everyone else is thinking. Conclusion. The greatest lesson is not that strong men stay silent. It is that they have learned where their energy truly belongs. They no longer waste their peace trying to convince those who refuse to understand. They no longer confuse reacting with strength. Instead, they choose clarity over chaos, discipline over impulse, and wisdom over ego. So here's the lesson to carry into your own life. Before you respond, pause. Before you argue, ask yourself if it's worth your peace. Before you explain yourself, remember that your character will always speak louder than your words. Master your emotions before you try to influence the world around you, because the strongest voice you'll ever have is the quiet confidence that comes from knowing exactly who you are. If this message resonated with you, subscribe to the channel and become part of a community dedicated to stoicism, emotional resilience, self-mastery, and timeless wisdom. Every new video is created to help you build a calmer mind, stronger character, and a life guided by purpose, not by emotion. Thank you for taking the time to watch until the end of the video. See you in the next videos.